on July 12th, we won't forget that day here in Anthem. All of a sudden, we saw police, everything happening here, and they had everything locked down.
And then out they come, and we're like, oh.
And they said there was a shooting at the entrance.
Did you see where they went?
They couldn't be in any of these businesses, right?
Nobody walks in with a pistol and just robs, right?
22 seconds is all it took.
The victim has gunshot wounds, right?
Multiple gunshot wounds, yeah. All black clothing, black helmets. One appeared to be a female. We have the video of inside of them actively doing it.
But these 22 seconds
looks like she smashes everything.
And then that's when the shooting starts up here.
don't show the whole story.
The horrible things that happened to Helen, you wouldn't even want to see in a horror movie.
Why do you believe her? I'm investigative reporter Erica Stapleton, and this is He Made Me Do It, a 12 News iTeam series uncovering how a teenager from Vermont became a robbery suspect in Arizona, saying she was forced into the crime by an abuser.
We were told that you're a victim of human trafficking.
We take a hard look at whether a suspect can also be a victim.
She's a danger.
The system is set up for women like this, or any victim like this, to really fail.
And if allegations of abuse were ignored.
I don't think they care.
22 seconds.
Somebody please help me!
How did they decide to choose this little store in Anthem? That's what bothers me.
Joe Alvarez is the past president of the Anthem Rotary Club, friends with the jeweler.
I still call it a miracle.
Who survived the shooting.
His injuries were very significant.
Very significant. He's lucky to be alive. There's people that said that he put himself in harm's way to protect the young ladies in that. And he took the brunt of what happened.
There were 5 people working in the store at the time of the robbery, who we aren't showing or naming to respect their request for privacy. And another warning, what you're about to see is hard to watch.
Have you guys seen the video yet?
The surveillance video shows some of the employees in the front cleaning up before closing when the 2 suspects came through the door.
He's got the gun.
The employees run to the back as the guy with the gun pushes forward. The other starts smashing the cases, even though the jewelry's not there.
I don't think they got anything.
The jeweler comes out from the back with his own gun, confronting the robbers when he gets shot.
He probably didn't even plan on shooting, but he did when he saw the gun pointed at him.
They fled with nothing.
They didn't take any jewelry.
I know. It was amateurs. You can tell it was amateurs.
Suspects outstanding.
While the community rallied around the jewelry store employees, the suspects were still at large.
Had to go that way.
They ran that way and went to the back.
Security video shows them on a motorcycle,
So they pulled in right here.
and law enforcement immediately started to search the area, high and low.
Who knows, they might be hunkered down.
So everyone was on alert.
On edge until 4 days later, July 16th. About 400 miles away in Southern California, cops chasing a U-Haul.
These guys were, I think it was a jewelry store robbery suspects out in Arizona.
Miles Madison, a photojournalist with County News Service, caught it all on camera. The chase goes on for more than an hour until police blew out the U-Haul's tires.
The driver just had a face of defeat. I think he knew exactly what was going to happen. He was going to jail for a long time, and I remember the female was visibly upset.
Police in California arrested 22-year-old Matthew Jones and 18-year-old Helen Simmons, their descriptions matching the suspects in the Anthem armed robbery case. They found a motorcycle packed in the back of the truck, black clothing, helmets, a hammer.
Oh, there was a sense of relief, right? They've got him. Now we gotta make sure that justice is served.
But much like the video of the robbery, the arrest doesn't tell the whole story. This was the moment Helen Simmons had been waiting for, someone to get her away from Matthew Jones.
You meet him on Tinder in Phoenix?
Yes.
A guy she met only weeks before, who she said wouldn't let her go. Helen Simmons didn't expect to be here.
I just want to talk to somebody.
Sitting in a police interrogation room after she was arrested in a police chase with a guy her family didn't even know.
I had no idea.
Kimberly Leonard first learned her daughter was in trouble during the chase when Helen tried to call her from the U-Haul.
Like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. It's just like, Mom, I think I'm gonna go to jail. I'm scared. I'm like, what? She says it's because of him. I'm like, what do you mean? It's not me, it was him. He made me do some horrible things, Mom.
Helen was 18 years old when she moved to Arizona, just a few weeks before the chase. She was supposed to be staying in Phoenix with her sister, Natasha.
I am aware of the capacity of what she would do. And this is so far beyond the scope of anything that she would do. When she moved out here, she did so with the intentions of really moving forward with her life. She had already been accepted into ASU for journalism. She wanted to be a photojournalist.
She loves to do different things, new things, go to different places. She's been to Spain, she's been to Jamaica. She loves to learn new things, explore. She learned dance and she loved it.
Her family shared this video Helen created for a class project in high school, full of dancing, outfit changes, personality. Helen playing the piano herself under the music.
It's always something she loves to do, something new and fun and interesting.
Helen seems composed on the surface, but at home, things weren't always the best. Helen told a forensic interviewer that her parents split when she was a kid, and the divorce was hard. Helen said she moved between her parents' places in New Hampshire and later Vermont. She said she'd smoke and drink, sometimes even at school, and briefly tried some harder drugs. At one point, she wound up staying with her high school boyfriend until things got bad. In 2021, Helen's brother-in-law died by suicide.
It sounds like Helen's been through a lot in her early years of life. How do you think that played into all of it?
A lot, because of everything, and she was vulnerable.
Being young and she'd just barely come out of a kind of like crazy relationship and stuff, I think she was seeking that connection with someone.
Maybe she was looking for somebody that cared.
Helen started swiping before she even got to Phoenix. Her phone records provided by her mom indicate Helen landed in Phoenix on June 29th, 2022. She said she met Matthew Jones soon after, some records saying June 30th, others July 1st. He picked up Helen from Natasha's house. Helen and Natasha checking in over text. "I really like this man, LOL," Helen wrote.
At first he was very sweet to her, I guess, of what she said.
Helen stayed over with Jones the first night, and the next night, and the night after that, essentially moving in with him at a Scottsdale apartment where he'd been staying with his sister.
I was concerned about it because it was a very quick kind of like she met him and all of a sudden she's gone type of thing.
Natasha tried to be supportive. She warned her little sister not to move too fast, but Helen would always reassure her. "Is everything going okay with him?" Natasha asked. "Yes," Helen replied. But things were not okay.
Oh gosh. Said you got big things to talk about.
The first time Helen told anyone what she said was really going on was in California, when she was questioned by Huntington Beach police, hours after she was taken into custody.
Because I'm not questioning you about the crime, and I honestly don't care about the crime. Okay? We were told that you're a victim of human trafficking, so we're here to talk to you as a victim.
A victim of human trafficking.
You meet him on Tinder in Phoenix?
Yes.
Helen walks the investigators through how she met Matthew Jones.
Did you move in with this guy that fast?
Yeah, let me explain
doing?
it. I didn't really have a choice because the first day I was like, okay, you're gonna give me a ride home. He's like, oh, it's late, I'll give you a ride home tomorrow.
She kept asking for a ride home, but said he would never take her.
And then eventually I started to like him, so I'm like, yeah, I'll just move in with you.
Helen said he started controlling her food, clothes, and phone.
Like a few days into it, I started to be like, okay, this is a little weird. He was very controlling.
As the days passed, she said he still wouldn't let her go home. There was only one time. They stopped by to grab some of her stuff while her sister wasn't there, and she said Matthew Jones wouldn't let her stay. When Helen said she tried to leave on her own, things turned violent.
He ended up choking me against the wall and then throwing me on the bed. He tied duct tape around my head, not just my mouth, but my head and my hair. He went and ran 2 or 3 times, and then he handcuffed my arms behind my back and then tied my legs together and told me that if I move, he's going to shoot me. And I grabbed his gun and put it to my head.
She described more physical violence and said he wouldn't let her take her prescribed mental health medications. Instead, he'd give her alcohol and unknown drugs. She kept trying to leave, but he'd always stop her, including the day before the jewelry store robbery.
He got out of the shower as I was leaving, and he absolutely flipped out. Like, he grabbed me and he started choking me like really bad. He hit me, and I know he bit me right here. That's how I have the black eye, because that was the day he punched me in the eye. I don't know if you
This
can see
time,
it.
Helen said there was a witness.
And then his sister was there, and she saw all of that. I was begging her to give me a ride home.
Helen said Jones took her from the apartment before his sister could intervene. She said they went to a motel in Scottsdale for the night. At one point, she tried to end her life or hurt herself to the point where she could be taken to the hospital. Natasha had no idea her sister was in trouble.
I guess he said not to tell us his true name.
Looking back, there were some signs that things weren't right.
There was a couple of times where she had texted me to come pick her up.
According to Natasha, Helen asked for a ride over a phone call. And when Natasha asked for the address, Helen sent a screenshot of Matthew's sister's apartment complex.
But then she texted back of like, no, it's fine. I was just overreacting, like it's fine. And then later she told me that each time he had taken control of her phone.
Another time, the night before the robbery, when Helen said she was at that Scottsdale motel, she texted Natasha to come get her.
I was like, okay, give me your address, I'll come get you.
But like before, Helen scaled it back.
But then she had said later, like, no, everything's fine. I'm gonna have him drop me off at your house tomorrow. So I waited for her the next day to show up.
But Helen never came home.
We're gonna help you with everything that happened in California.
Okay.
The investigators in Huntington Beach said it would be up to law enforcement in Arizona to investigate everything that Helen just told them, but that they could help her with what she said happened next in Orange County.
He's been making me take like pills and stuff and putting things under my tongue. I don't even know half of what's gone on anymore. I know I've had to like random guys for money.
Helen described how Matthew Jones put images of her online, advertising sex for money. Helen admits it's all been a blur, but remembered this happened with at least 4 men.
Is this something where you were agreeing to have sex with them for money if you got to keep the money? But now he's stealing the money from you when you get back to the car?
Yeah.
Like, is it like that, or is he forcing you to go in and get raped? Because there's a big difference.
Yeah, so let me explain it. So I told him, I'm like, I don't want to be around you. I don't like you. I want to leave as soon as I can. And he's like, well, you cannot leave me until we both have enough money to be set by ourselves. And so he was like, you have to do these things in order to leave me, in order to have the money to leave me.
And what do you mean by these things?
Like, random people.
How much money was he?
talk to them.
Did he give you an amount that you each needed to get?
$350 at the least.
Like $350?
Yeah, at the least.
That doesn't go very far with inflation where it's at, you know?
One of the biggest questions in all of this, why didn't she just leave or call for help?
It just pisses me off because I don't know how I could have left, and everybody's like, why didn't you just leave? I was so scared.
Helen felt like she did try. The messages with her sister, her attempts to escape, that she always said ended in violence.
That's part of what these guys actually look for is, I'm not insulting you here, right? But did you ever fight back?
Not after I got tied up. That was the last time I fought back.
So they use violence to make you a little weaker and make you do what they want you to do, and then you fear fighting back, right? So once he gets control of you, then that's kind of the weapon that he's going to use to keep you in line.
Helen reported that she tried to help herself in California, too, letting a motel worker know she was in trouble. When she tried to leave one of the motel rooms, Helen said Matthew Jones grabbed her and choked her until she almost passed out.
And he assaults you in the hotel room there?
Yes.
You want to be a victim of the domestic violence with him?
Yeah.
Helen, labeled as a victim, but at the same time,
Hi, Helen Todd.
a suspect.
How you doing, Jacob?
Nice to meet you.
2 detectives from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office just drove in from Arizona. They take over questioning, and Helen starts her story again.
And so...
Meeting Matthew Jones, moving in with him right away, how she tried to leave.
That's when he gave me the black eye.
How he made her have sex for money in California.
Sorry to deal with all that.
I put myself in the situation.
Helen shares another attempt to harm herself, another attempt to escape.
I thought that the only way I could get out of the situation was to kill myself.
Well, it sounds like he's made you do some pretty horrible things.
Yeah, I don't even know if I can live with it.
So what's the worst thing you think he's ever made you do?
At first, Helen said the sex for money in California. Then they talk about her allegations in Arizona again, that Helen could be a victim there too.
If we're able to determine that a crime has taken place, or you want to be a victim,
Okay, yeah.
I appreciate you being honest with me. It's not an easy thing to talk about.
The detectives keep pressing.
What's the worst thing he ever made you do?
He made me take all these pills, and he told me that if I don't whip him up the time, I'm sure that he's gonna kill me, and he's gonna kill my sister.
A confession.
I didn't want to do it. He made me. I just wanted to go home. I know you guys know. He made me tell me he was gonna kill me. I've never done anything like that before.
When Helen first sat down in this interview room, she was told she was being interviewed about what Matthew Jones did to her. She was never told otherwise when MCSO detectives first came into the picture.
You have the right to remain silent.
But that changed after she started talking about the robbery.
Do you understand your rights?
Yes, I understand. What's gonna happen to me? I'm scared to talk. I'm scared I'm gonna go to jail.
We don't have any charges right now.
Okay.
Helen answers all of the MCSO detectives' questions about the robbery.
He's like, you're gonna go in and you're going to hit the glass with this sledgehammer after I hold the gun to these people.
She said he forced her at gunpoint inside the store and threatened her life and her sister's life if she didn't listen to him.
And then I heard a few shots go off and I didn't know who it was. I just dipped out that door and I was like, I just want to go home. And he went out the back door, I think.
What you're about to see is hard to watch. After finishing their questions about the robbery, the MCSO detectives leave, and Helen is alone in the room.
I'm so scared. Why would you do that to me? I'm gonna go to jail because it's something I didn't even have a choice to do.
Keep in mind that less than 3 weeks ago, she didn't even know Matthew Jones.
Somebody please help me!
And she just revealed all she said she went through to 2 different sets of investigators.
I'm so scared. Why would you do this to me, Matthew? You know I can't handle this. I can't handle it. Why would you make me do that?
She cries in the corner for about 6 minutes until the Huntington Beach investigators come back into the room.
I'm so scared.
Helen.
Please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me.
Nobody's hurt you at all.
Please don't take me to jail. I'm gonna die in jail.
Yeah, do you want to go home or not?
Please, I really want to go home. I'm so scared.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm so scared.
Helen, I'm going to explain some stuff to you. Remember how we talked earlier?
Yes.
Let's act like an adult.
The balancing act between suspect and victim puts this whole case in a big gray area. But here in Huntington Beach, Helen was hopeful. She was finally free of Matthew Jones and finally might be able to go home.
It sounds like you're going to get to go home, but we have a search warrant for some things from you.
Helen said she was never taken for an exam after disclosing she was abused and trafficked. But analysts with Maricopa County did take some photographs where she said you can see her black eye. But these photographs weren't part of her case as a victim. They took the same kind of photographs of Matthew Jones, all on a warrant for the jewelry store robbery case. Helen would not be coming home.
Good luck to you in the future here. Let's not meet any more dudes on Tinder.
Instead, she'd be extradited back to Arizona and booked in jail, charged in the jewelry store robbery. And they were all about to learn that Matthew Jones had a history of hurting women.
He was in prison for keeping a woman against her will before.
It's a whole different world being in jail, and it's not something I ever thought I would have to deal with.
The I-Team spent nearly 4 hours over the course of several days, speaking with Helen on the phone from the Estrella jail in Phoenix. She admits she willingly went with Matthew Jones at first.
I did say that it was kind of like a relationship, but when I really look back at it, there was no care, there was no affection. I didn't even like him. I could not stand him. I was scared of him.
She even knew he'd been to jail, but said he lied about why. The truth is, Matthew Jones was in an Arizona prison before he met Helen. He'd been convicted of aggravated assault and unlawful imprisonment for a case that has a lot of similarities to Helen's. In that case, court records say in 2020, Matthew Jones assaulted a woman he met online. Abuse that happened in Arizona and California over the course of about 6 weeks. When she asked to leave, she said Matthew Jones hit her. When she tried to escape through a window, she said he grabbed her and threw her on the bed. Later, she said he tried to suffocate her with a pillow. The young woman finally got free after discreetly sending a message to her mom, "Send police now." Police went out to Matthew's mom's house in Phoenix, where they were staying, and took him into custody. Records show Jones took a plea deal and served more than a year in prison in that case, and met Helen less than 2 weeks after his release. There's more. Before that case in Arizona, Jones was in prison in California. Records indicate he has several convictions in that state, including a case with assault and domestic violence involving another past partner.
Do you understand? Yes.
Side by side, Matthew and Helen are very different.
Can you tell me what's going on?
Oh, I'd rather speak when I have an attorney with me present.
Okay.
Unlike Helen, Matthew Jones didn't answer any questions about the robbery case,
All right, sir.
which was moving forward in Arizona. Helen Simmons and Matthew Jones were charged with the same crimes: aggravated assault, endangerment, kidnapping, attempted robbery, both facing decades in prison. Jones had just one additional charge: for having a gun as a prohibited possessor. They both pled not guilty.
He's a predator.
Bracing for a battle in court, Helen's family hired a second attorney to help the public defender. Katrina Ontiveros worked at that law office.
The horrible things that happened to Helen, you wouldn't even want to see in a horror movie.
She's not an attorney, but she is an advocate for Helen.
The media is portraying her as boyfriend, girlfriend, jewelry heist, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wait, she's not the girlfriend, she's the victim.
Why do you believe her?
Because when she speaks, she's genuine. She speaks from the heart. And when I read through that discovery, it's right along with what she's saying. It's not anything made up.
But things weren't looking good for Helen. In court, Helen's team asked to lower her bond.
I fully believe that my client is a victim in this case.
But the prosecutor wasn't buying it. A memo from the prosecutor points out that Helen went into the store first, Jones right behind her with his gun. She broke the display cases in the store, causing fear to those inside. She was the one who rented the U-Haul they'd ultimately get away in, and was even inside U-Haul by herself. The memo said that Helen knew about the robbery plan beforehand and told police that Jones cased the store. The memo notes Helen claimed to be a victim of domestic violence and sex trafficking, and did not mention the robbery until police asked her about the worst thing Jones made her do.
She's a danger.
Helen maintains that Matthew Jones forced her to do everything, threatening her life and her sister's if she didn't do as he said. To her, the threat didn't seem empty.
I just wish that everybody would understand that that's not me. I just did that because I didn't want to die.
You can be both. You can be a victim and have other people that are affected by your victimization.
Dominique Rosepowitz is the director of ASU's Office of Sex Trafficking Intervention Research. She spent more than 8 hours interviewing Helen in jail about this case.
I have read all the reports related to the case and looked at the evidence, and her story makes sense.
Dominique picked up on key signs of trafficking in Helen's story, like taking control of her food, sleep, isolating her from family, forcing sex without her consent.
Her mindset, he had choked her multiple times by this point. She was really afraid of him. She did not have most of her belongings with her. She had no way to escape. So she really felt, from my understanding and what she told me, that she had nowhere to go and no one to turn to.
Some people might not believe it's possible for someone to gain control that fast.
It happens very quickly. As you break a person down, they're less and less likely to think on their own, to have the natural ability to defend themselves. And in 2 weeks, he did that amazingly well, systematically. And if we believe that people will drink poison for a cult leader, why do we not believe that a person will commit a crime with someone else who has broken them down so systematically?
We show Dominique parts of Helen's first interview with police.
Please help me.
She's just terrified.
Is this typical behavior for a victim?
Well, there is no typical behavior of a victim. I think that's one of the hardest parts, right? If people had a sign on them and did something typical, we could identify people much better, whether they're on the good side or the not so good side, right? She's 18 years old and absolutely was a participant in a very violent crime.
But also went through something else herself.
Absolutely.
The I-Team uncovered something else, that even from jail, Matthew Jones was trying to control Helen.
Yeah.
A letter.
He sent me a letter, essentially like trying to manipulate me into not testifying against him.
I'm here watching over you, making sure you all right. Just remember that, he writes. While dealing with this, the best thing we can do is not snitch on ourselves. Keep what happened inside your head, and don't screw over yourself. He graphically describes having sex with her and tells her she looked good skinny to watch what she's eating in jail. He tells her not to take a deal without him. That would make him look guilty. We have to do this together. Don't be nervous. I know how the law works. As long as we stick together, we come out on top. Don't overthink, just listen up. I know what they have on us, and it's not too much. Trust me, we can win.
And then he signed his name as God, which is what he made me call him.
Helen said she didn't respond to this letter and turned it over to investigators. Meanwhile, Matthew Jones penned another letter to the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, blaming Helen for the robbery.
If you read the letter that he sent me and then read the letter that he sent the sheriff's office, it's two completely different things.
Helen did eventually make it out on bond, just before Christmas in 2022. She started staying with her sister Natasha, Matthew Jones still in jail.
And even, while she was on house arrest, she got a job. She did classes at the community college, spent time with family and everything. So I guess that's what we had envisioned, especially at this age, of her going to school, us doing fun things together.
Helen also went with Katrina in January 2023 to talk with the MCSO detective on the case she filed against Matthew Jones in Arizona.
So I'm the investigator of your domestic violence case.
This is the same detective she talked to in California. This time, they talk for more than 3 hours, more in depth. Helen sharing more details, like Matthew Jones intentionally burning her leg on his motorcycle.
Like you could see the steam coming off my leg.
An injury Helen said you could see when she was first arrested. She also brought up something else. Helen said Matthew Jones forced her to have sex multiple times at the apartment.
He's like, I own you. He's like, you're my slave, so whatever I want you to do, you have to do.
And again, the night before the robbery.
I know it's hard to talk about this next incident, but let's discuss it just like
Helen tells him this is when she and Matthew Jones were in the Scottsdale motel. She said Matthew Jones brought a drug dealer in the room and forced her to have sex with him in exchange for drugs. Then she said Matthew sexually assaulted her again.
I was scared to tell him to stop or to no, because like Matthew had said right before, he was like, you better not say anything, you better not do anything, or you know what's gonna happen.
What Helen doesn't know is that the new details will be a problem for her down the line. What she also doesn't know.
His sister comes in to the bathroom because she heard me, screaming and everything.
That Matthew's sister actually called police for help before the robbery.
I remember her saying, she's like, why are you doing this again?
The I-Team uncovered something that, as far as we can tell, never came up in court. During the day on July 11th, 2022, the day before the robbery in Anthem, Matthew Jones's sister called Scottsdale police. The call log from police said Jones's sister was concerned about a friend of her brother's named Helen, who had a possible confrontation with her brother. Details, police wrote, were vague, but Jones's sister said Helen had 2 black eyes, and that Helen and her brother had already left the apartment. Scottsdale police went to the apartment, calling it a welfare check, but it never turned into an official report.
They never saw Helen. They never saw Matthew, it seems. What do you make of that, knowing what would come the next day?
We have to be careful about saying someone should have done something if we didn't give them enough to go on. She didn't call 911. She wasn't there. They didn't interact with her. I wish they had. I think everybody wishes, including every single person involved in the case.
When Dominique started looking at Helen's case, she realized something. She thinks Helen was also trafficked in Arizona.
But if you ask questions about what happened, she absolutely was. Matthew Jones accepted drugs in order for a stranger to have sex with her.
This, Helen reported, was at the Scottsdale motel, hours after Jones's sister called police, and hours before the robbery in Anthem.
Do you feel like it was consensual?
I have worked with over 3,000 victims of trafficking, and I would say 20% of them really understood the victimization they experienced.
Helen admits now she didn't know how to spot red flags.
Better to be safe than sorry.
And at some points just ignored them.
I was not being safe, and here I am.
She also wonders whether anyone else missed red flags. There's Jones's sister's call to police that never turned into anything. Matthew Jones was on probation, and he wasn't supposed to have a gun. And Tinder's terms of use say felons are prohibited from creating accounts. A rep for Tinder said they didn't have a record of Matthew Jones meeting Helen Simmons and refused to answer any other questions.
Should someone have been monitoring him?
In my opinion, yeah. Why was he allowed to just, come out and be able to do this to whoever he wanted?
While Helen's reports of abuse are up in the air, the robbery case is moving through court, and Helen learned her defenses were limited. She was told she couldn't use duress, meaning she was forced into the crime, because the jeweler suffered physical injuries in the shooting, even though records show Matthew Jones was the one who pulled the trigger. With a duress defense off the table, it seemed like Helen's only path forward would be through prison. There's no avoiding it. Helen Simmons is going to prison, but there's still a debate over whether she should be.
There's evidence out there. They should have looked at this case and said, wow, she's abused.
Drop the charges and charge her appropriately for breaking the glass.
Without duress as a defense, Helen was afraid to take her chances at trial, where she was facing decades in prison. Instead, she took a plea deal for kidnapping and aggravated assault, agreeing to 5 to 10 years in prison.
Has anyone forced you or threatened you in any way to get you to plead guilty?
Helen's hired attorney called the plea deal extremely harsh and an injustice. She said she tried to negotiate a better deal, probation, or a term of less than 5 years in prison, but no luck. Helen felt like she didn't have a better option. After signing the plea deal, Helen went back to jail and connected with Dominique for the first time through a new jail program that helps victims of trafficking.
When do you think she should have been treated as a victim?
The day that she was picked up in Huntington Beach, that she reported that she had been a victim of 2 crimes of physical assault and a sexual assault by a customer. That's where initially it should have happened. When she came back to Maricopa County, she should have been treated as a victim there as well.
To your understanding, did that ever happen?
No.
The I-Team reviewed all available records for the cases in Arizona and California, where Helen is documented as a victim, and found that law enforcement and Helen were not on the same page. As for California, the Huntington Beach Police Department took Helen's allegations and passed them off to Costa Mesa and Westminster, where they thought the crimes occurred. Even though 3 agencies were involved in California, it was still tough to get answers. Costa Mesa Police said it was Huntington Beach who did the investigation, although it's not clear what the agency did or didn't do.
You want to be a victim of the domestic violence with him?
Yeah.
Helen said she never heard from police in Huntington Beach after this interview, and that she had no idea Costa Mesa and Westminster were involved until the I-Team tracked down the cases and told her. Another shock for Helen. Both Westminster and Costa Mesa police departments wrote in their files that she was not a victim of sex trafficking. Costa Mesa's report said Helen was having sex with the men by choice and had multiple attempts to leave. Westminster police wrote that Helen changed her story and said she was consensually having sex with people for money, and that Helen was posting photos of herself to meet men. Westminster police wrote that this came from the Huntington Beach police report, but if you listen, that's not really what Helen said.
Basically, he would post my picture, like post pictures of me, like dressed, naked, whatever. And so he was like, you have to do these things in order to leave me, in order to have the money to leave me.
And what do you mean by these things?
Like, random people.
When we showed this to Dominique.
But that's what coercion looks like. If you do this, you sell sex for me, I will release you.
Helen denies changing her story.
I had bruises all over my body. They took pictures of it. And I had also told them that I had been sexually assaulted and choked unconscious that day. I hear that there's forensic tests that they could have done.
It's also not clear if any police agency in California ever got records from Helen and Matthew's phones.
There should be things on both my phone and his phone.
Records show those phones were taken into evidence by the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office and are still seemingly being held in Arizona. The only thing we have access to on Helen's phone is the call log from that time, provided by her mom, We cross-checked all the numbers and found 4 unknown numbers from California from the time frame Helen said Matthew Jones forced her to have sex for money. So I called them.
Hi there, my name is Erica Stapleton. I'm actually a reporter at 12 News in Phoenix, Arizona. Someone at this number might have met her back in 2022. She would have been traveling with a man in a U-Haul, could have possibly met her at a motel or at their home.
The first 2 guys I called denied knowing Helen.
Have you ever been contacted about? Well, they hung up.
When I called the second 2 numbers, no one answered, and no one called back.
The mailbox is full and cannot accept any messages at this time. Goodbye.
As Helen's cases in California stand now, Westminster police closed their case, pending contact with Helen. Helen was in jail when this case was filed, and said no one at Westminster police ever reached out to her. Our request to talk with officers in Westminster about this case all went unanswered. Same with the Huntington Beach Police Department. Helen said she never heard from the Costa Mesa Police Department either. Still, that agency turned the case over to the Orange County District Attorney's Office. The DA rejected it, saying there wasn't enough evidence and could be resubmitted if there was further investigation.
I think that we missed our opportunities to support a person who'd been victimized. We, as the big we were clouded by her participation in a crime.
In Arizona, the detective on Helen's case questioned her allegations, noting she didn't bring up Jones sexually assaulting her in Arizona during their first interview, but did when she was out on bond.
I had a hard time talking about the abuse that I went through. I blocked a lot of it out of my mind, so I didn't have to think about it. It took a lot of therapy for me to be able to really think about it, talk about it.
This isn't something Helen just brought up to us.
She had kind of like disassociated from the experience and went through so much trauma from the sex trafficking that she had said that she felt like 2 different people and she was trying to merge.
MCSO records indicate it took months for investigators to reach out to Jones's sister about what she may have witnessed, and MCSO said she hasn't gotten back to them. She also declined to speak with us. Something else stands out. This same detective working Helen's domestic violence case was also an investigator on the robbery case where Helen is a suspect. In other words, the same detective investigating Helen's allegations was also investigating her. An MCSO spokesperson said this is not a conflict of interest and that each allegation is investigated independently.
He said he was investigating it. He said he was doing stuff. And now nothing.
In August 2023, the month after Helen signed her plea deal, a new detective that works sex trafficking cases met with Helen in jail and opened a new case. As things stand now, both of Helen's cases with MCSO are still open. MCSO declined our interview request. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office also declined our interview requests. But a spokesperson told us, when it comes to prosecuting Helen Simmons, prosecutors could only focus on the case in front of them, the robbery. They've never received any cases where Helen is listed as a victim. But in court, the prosecutor said her allegations were considered, offering her less prison time than Matthew Jones in a plea deal.
I do think sometimes that prison is an appropriate option for people who have been involved in human trafficking. And I do think that sometimes those second chance of deferred judgments are appropriate. And I think it's a case-by-case basis.
Janelle Goodrich is not involved in Helen's case. But part of her role with From Silence to Saved in Denver is working with law enforcement and prosecutors from the beginning of these cases, trying to figure out what's best for victims who are also facing criminal charges.
And I've heard homicide detectives say that they would rather be in the homicide unit than the human trafficking unit because it's easier to prove a homicide than it is human trafficking. If you don't have sometimes that digital evidence and things like that to follow back, it really falls on the shoulders of a victim or a survivor, and that's a lot.
But that doesn't mean allegations of trafficking shouldn't be investigated at all.
I believe that every district attorney and prosecutor in these types of situations, they have a duty to look into all of the claims, as does law enforcement. If you dig a little deeper and give a little bit more attention to detail on it, you might uncover something else.
And in Helen's case,
our system responded to her only as a perpetrator, not as a victim. And I think we have to be able to do both.
Me personally, I just say, why? Why do you come to Anthem?
It's a question we've had this whole time. Not just why this jewelry store, But why Helen? Why any of this? Helen told us that Matthew Jones picked this store because he thought he could get a lot of money. For Joe Alvarez, no answer justifies what happened.
One of the victims, the jeweler, was shot several times. And so we went into pray mode. The following day or so, I met with my Rotary group and I said, look, we got to do something here. Sometimes I still get goosebumps about what happened that day. And, at the end of the day, we were able to raise $38,000 in a 5-hour car wash. I mean, that, to me, shows the support that this community gives its members.
Support. The jeweler needed a lot.
It was a long road. He's a fighter. He wasn't going to let this thing get him down. There's a sentencing. They're paying their dues, and we're going to go on.
More than a year after the robbery, everyone had to face that day again. Matthew Jones went before the judge first. You won't see the jewelry store employees speaking in court, but you can hear their voices.
We didn't ask for this. We had no choice. My life will never be the same.
The sounds of sirens continue to bring back horrific memories of that day. I felt like any form of safety and peace I ever had was taken from me that day.
The mental and emotional scars I have are immense, and they will remain with me for the rest of my life. He must face the consequences of his choices, and the punishment should reflect the severity of the trauma he inflicted upon his innocent lives.
Matthew Jones sat and listened until it was his turn to talk.
I just wanted to take full responsibility for my actions. It's not like I planned every detail out of that day.
He didn't apologize.
And I'm just thankful that, things weren't worse.
The judge sentenced Matthew Jones to the max under his plea deal, 30 years in prison. But Helen's sentencing was different. The question of whether she's a suspect, victim, or both at the forefront. Some of the jewelry store victims addressed her directly.
I hope the court considers the full extent of the harm caused to my employees, myself, my family, and our community when finalizing the sentences for these two monsters.
Destruction, terror, and pain. What an awful way, Helen, to impact the world. I don't know her story or how it led her to where she is today, but my honest prayer is that she seek to have a better impact on the lives of others than she had on mine.
And no matter what you say, you still committed these crimes. I think you misunderstand the definition of what a victim is. We are victims.
The prosecutor dug in.
She may be a victim, and she may be a victim by Matthew Jones. But here, in this matter, as to this robbery, as to the assaults, as to the trauma, she is not the victim. She's the perpetrator.
So it's really hard to hear what they have to say about her, that they're afraid of her.
Helen had a village, including her mom. 20 people wrote letters to the judge or spoke out in court, asking for Helen to get a second chance.
He used physical violence, sexual violence, emotional manipulation, and threats of harm to control Ms. Simmons.
Dominique even wrote an expert report to try and mitigate Helen's sentence. Helen's defense gave one final plea.
Matthew Jones was never charged for what he did to Helen Simmons. I'm glad he got 30 years today. I think he should get another 30 years for what he did to Helen.
Then Helen had her chance to speak.
I'm so sorry. I know it's not an excuse for me to be scared. I know it's not an excuse for me to, feel like I didn't have a choice. I was just so scared of what he would do to me too. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Oh my God.
The judge had a lot to consider. He called the state's plea offer generous, but also summed up the grayness of this case in a black and white way.
I can say that had Mr. Jones never met you, I think Mr. Jones still would have committed a crime like this. On the other hand, I think if you had never met Mr. Jones, I don't think you would have ever been involved in a crime like this.
That's the thing about court. It's very black and white. You're guilty or you're not. Helen's story is believable, but it hasn't been thoroughly investigated to prove if it's true. The fact is that Helen was part of a robbery, and she was going to pay for it. The judge sentenced Helen to 6 years in prison. When Helen Simmons and Matthew Jones were first arrested in the U-Haul, Helen said they were on their way to see the ocean at Huntington Beach. She never made it, just like she never made it to ASU, never made it to her journalism classes, never made it to her dream. It all came crashing down.
Nothing good comes out of anything bad. But I think that the legal system has taken action. We've got a little bit of closure. Let's move forward.
But again, she's made these claims of he abused her into it, he abused her after.
I can't comment on that. I don't know. It'd be a shame if that's what happened. It really would.
Do you think the sentence was fair?
Fairness in the criminal justice system is really complicated.
And like the judge basically said, if it wasn't for him, she wouldn't have committed it. Then why is she serving 6 years?
The system is set up for women like this, or any victim like this, to really fail.
Do I think having her go to prison for 6 years has any purpose? I don't.
As much as Helen's loved ones and advocates want to see her out of prison, there's a part of Helen that's conflicted.
I deserve to go to prison for destroying their property. You know, hurting their feelings and scaring them and traumatizing them. I understand that. I need to get punished for that because, I did that. However, for me to get punished for his actions, I feel like it's not right.
The I-Team reached out to Matthew Jones in prison for this story, but haven't gotten any answers back. His attorney also declined to speak with us.
And I will not give up on trying to get him charged and convicted for what he did to me as well, because he's just going to get out and do it again.
The last time we could record a conversation with Helen was before she moved from jail to Perryville, the state women's prison in Goodyear. But we have been able to go talk with her through visitation as we continue our reporting. Recently, she told me she'd rather be here than dead on July 12, 2022, if she didn't listen to Matthew Jones. More than 2 years after the robbery, she still believes he would have killed her if she didn't go into the jewelry store.
I'm still planning when I get out and all this is over with, I'm still going to graduate from ASU. I hope that other women can see this and not feel alone. Maybe they can reach out and get help, because not a lot of women know how to.
Helen finally got away from Matthew Jones, but she won't get out of prison until 2028.